What's going on, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, Joker back again, once again. So, in a blog post on Bungie.net, link in the description below if you want to go ahead and check that out for yourself, called The State of Destiny 2, Bungie outlined various fixes that will be coming to Destiny 2 on December 5th and December 12th with the Curse of Osiris DLC. It should be noted that the vast majority of these changes will be free for everybody who owns Destiny 2 and will not require the Curse of Osiris. That said, without the Curse of Osiris, your mileage may vary. Hell, with the Curse of Osiris, your mileage may vary. These December changes were also listed alongside other future changes that are scheduled for sometime in Nebulous 2018. Given that Bungie likes to use what they call release vehicles to push large pieces of content and updates, this should likely read as part of DLC 2, DLC 2's release window, or whatever the equivalent for Destiny 2's April update is, if they have one at all. If not, as far-reaching as Destiny 2's version of Taken King. That's not a criticism, I'm simply stating when we can likely see, at the earliest, these projected 2018 changes. So what are the changes coming December 5th and 12th with the Curse of Osiris? Well, in short, the December update gives us two types of significant changes. Changes to the loot economy and changes to the endgame. The changes to the loot economy severely outweigh the changes to the endgame, so we'll start with the endgame. The first thing of note and of concern is the return of the Heroic Strike playlist from Destiny 1. The reason it's of concern is because Bungie has not outlined whether this will require Destiny 2 The Curse of Osiris to compete in, or just Destiny 2. In the past, newer strike playlist would require the DLC because there was new strikes added to them. The next changes to the endgame are loot-based, and I'm going to say this here and now. Loot changes are really the only changes that are coming in this update. These changes simultaneously understand what people are mad about, what people want changed, and yet miss the mark in addressing any of those concerns. And somehow, some way, the game is made easier and much more casual as a result of it, but I digress. On December 5th, armor ornaments will be brought back from Destiny 1 and added to some existing armor sets for visual customization. The endgame grind introduced for these ornaments is that these ornaments will be unlocked by completing objectives specific to those armor sets. Ornaments will be applied to base pieces of armor that you may already own, and you can now unlock on vendors if not. In Season 2, the following sets of armor have their ornaments unlocked for their respective activities: Vanguard Faction Armor, Crucible Faction Armor, Trials of 9 Armor, Iron Banner Armor, Dead Orbit Armor, Future War Cult Armor, New Monarchy Armor, Eater of Worlds Raid Lair Armor. So that all sounds great, but a couple of things. First, am I supposed to be thankful for something introduced in Destiny 1, then taken away, being reintroduced here again? Mind you, there's not a new set of armor for these factions like we would get in every DLC in Destiny 1. So essentially, what's happened here is they've reskinned it without reskinning it and called it an ornament. And they don't have to do the work of creating new sets of armor like they would between Destiny 1 Vanilla, Destiny 1 Dark Below, Destiny 1 House of Wolves, Destiny 1 Taken King, Destiny 1 Rise of Iron. Bungie, in a kind of genius way, have done what they essentially would have done anyways, but now they've presented it in a way that seems like we're getting a new endgame grind. But you know what? It's fine. Whatever. I actually respect that. Second, anyone who has followed me for any amount of time probably already knows where this is going. Although these ornaments and Masterwork weapons create an additional grind in the game for players who want that grind, you've also got to incentivize that grind. Destiny 2 has gone from a loot grind game to a collection dress-up sim. Fine. I'll look at what the game is, not what I wish it was. If this is the course that Destiny is going to take as a game, then why does armor still have stats? In Destiny 2, currently, recovery and resilience stats on armor are the only two stats that matter, with recovery being the most vital of the two. The more recovery you have, the faster your health and shields regenerate, and it's noticeable. Now, I understand that the intent was to try to make the classes different by giving Hunters higher mobility stats, Titans higher resilience stats, and Warlocks higher recovery stats. But, as with all things, intent and execution are two very, very different things, especially when it comes to Bungie. While the intent may have been to distinguish the classes, what has actually happened is hunters are squishy and take less damage to kill, and they are out of the fights for longer periods of time. Titans are still the fastest class in the game, take more damage, but at depreciating values for every point they put into resilience after a certain threshold, and are taken out of fights just long enough to be annoying. And warlocks? Well, it doesn't matter how slow they are. Pro tip, they're not actually all that slow, because they have a great health pool and the highest recovery stat in the game. And they have Devourer, making what's typically a glass cannon in most games the best tank in Destiny. On top of that, no one gets to use what they want unless they just don't know how stats work, because stat distribution is vastly more important than how you look. What I would recommend doing is having all 3 stat nodes on each piece of armor and allowing players to decide what builds they want, or adding transmog to the game, or armor rerolling, whatever's easiest. Because as is, a good portion of the armor in this game will be undesirable, not because it doesn't look cool, I'm sure you'll have your collectors and such, but from a practical standpoint, for people who are invested in, say, PvP, and the best builds for PvP. Mind you, it's not like this doesn't affect PvE, there's an overwhelming majority of the armor in the game that is simply undesirable because it's useless. So what's inevitably going to happen is people will grind out the set of armor that they will use 99.9% of the time, and then maybe grind out what they think looks cool, but it'll be more of a, oh hey, look at this cool thing I have to show off and derp around in, and not a, I have this desirable piece of gear that I actively want to use. If any aspect of Destiny needed reforging or random rolls or something, it would be armor. The last piece of new and interesting endgame content that Bungie will be adding to Destiny 2 with the December update is Mastercraft Weapons. Now, this does introduce a few kind of interesting things. When a weapon is dropped as a Mastercraft weapon or upgraded to be a Mastercraft weapon, it gets a few new perks that its non-Mastercraft version doesn't have. It gets a kill tracker. Each new Mastercraft weapon will have a kill tracker that displays either your total kills or your crucible kills. You've likely seen this in games like Titanfall 2. It'll also have the innate ability to drop orbs on multi-kills and a slight increase to a select pool of stats that can be re-rolled. Note, I said stats, not perks. The example given was a +10 to the reload stat of Uriel's gift. So essentially this will create a loot grind to obtain or forge mastercrafted weapons of your choosing that will give you a slight weapon buff based on the perks that are allotted to the perk pool that you can choose from. That said, with all the new ways to get loot and all the way loot is just thrown at you in Destiny 2 already, I don't imagine that this grind will be anything to write home about.
Dear Anna, things are rough out here in the Curse of Osiris, in the Glasslands of Mercury. It's been what, 1 day and I've already got my 18th Master Forged Uriel's gift with a +10 to reload. Morale's low here. The live stream's poor showing could never have prepared us for how bad it actually is out here. Phazon's gone crazy. He's running around the donut-shaped map like an idiot. And V? Well, I think he drank the Vex milk, and now is one with the collective. Dave, he ain't said much since we got out here, but then again, he ain't said much at all. Well, we're moving on now. We've got a public event to complete for 2 tokens and a blue. I'll ride again soon. Forever yours. Love, Joker.
Look, this Mastercrafted thing is interesting, and it seems like the foundation for something that will hopefully get expanded upon. I'd like to see this done with armor, in fact, and I'm interested to see how the super economy in PvP will be changed due to a perk that grants you orbs for multi-kills, and multi-kills being granted for assists in PvP. Multi-kills are not a hard thing to do, more so when they're rewarded for assists, as I just said. So, with a team shot meta being further incentivized by this ability to produce orbs, and thus snowballing into multiple supers per game, it'll be interesting to see how this will be addressed, as the more hallway shooting team-oriented gameplay of Destiny 2's PvP has been a huge point of discontent with the community, and this perk incentivizes that. Overall, these changes are a single, tiny baby step in the right direction, a 1/10 of a half measure. There are some cool ideas presented here, but without changes to significant systems like the stat distribution on armor, a lot of these changes are going to be pointless. These endgame fixes are a band-aid. A very, very nice looking band-aid. It's got Batman on it, and it's waterproof. What more could you ask for? But it's a band-aid that's trying to reattach a severed arm, while ignoring the actual issue of the severed arm.
Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look! Just a flesh wound.
Speaking of hemorrhaging, I wish I could say that the Mastercrafted Weapons will provide a satisfying grind for the end game, in the chase for your favorite Mastercraft weapons. However, on top of all the ways it's already ridiculously easy to obtain loot in Destiny 2, everything has been made vastly more rewarding. And I mean way more rewarding, like return of 3 of coins rewarding. Strikes will give more loot, more tokens. Commanders of Allah and Shacks will sell gift consumables for legendary shards that will be used during strikes or crucible matches and serve the following functions. Grant a bonus reward for everybody in that activity upon completion, friend or foe alike. Awarding anything from faction tokens to a round of exotic engrams for everyone in the match. Legendary shards also now have a plethora of ways that they can be used with the different vendors. For example, for 97 legendary shards, Xur will now offer an engram that gives you an exotic that you don't already have. This can only be purchased once a week, and I'm assuming once per character, not once per account. The gunsmith will also sell mods, and the loot will flow like salt in the Iron Banner. Now, here's where we really get into it. I do like the fact that vendors now have an actual inventory. But was getting loot ever really a problem with Destiny 2? I mean, repeats were a huge issue, and that will be fixed, but outside of repeats, wasn't the overly generous nature of the way loot flowed kind of an issue? And they've gone and made it more generous? To what end? You'll have everything that's worth having by the end of the week, if that. In fact, with as generous as the loot system is, you would think that this would be the perfect vehicle to bring back random rolls. For me, in Destiny 1, I never really took issue with the RNG loot system, as it gave me something to grind for. In fact, I still find myself logging in from time to time to try to get a god rolled Aya Luna. My biggest issue with the way random rolls worked in Destiny 1 was twofold. One, there was just a lot of horrible perks, something that seems to have been carried over into Destiny 2 that would make good weapons horrible. And two, the rate at which you got things like Aya Luna. An Aya Luna would drop, if I was lucky, once a week, once every 2 weeks. So when it turned out to be bad or wasn't the god roll, it just further compounded the frustration of the system. Balancing random rolls or making random rolls satisfying isn't hard. It really isn't. Just as long as you use some basic common sense when planning weapon stats and what perk pools those weapons draw from. For example, just don't do things like, I don't know, make shotguns with the highest damage stat, also have the highest range stat, and then give them multiple range enhancing perks. When you do stupid stuff like that, you're just asking for trouble. It really is, at the end of the day, just that simple. It's as simple as saying, no weapon should perform like Fellwinter's Lie, and then designing smart statted weapons with smart perk pools that these weapons draw from that stops that from happening. So I'd have to imagine when they craft these weapons, they have an idea of what the best roll is, what the worst roll is, and what the most broken roll is, as to not accidentally create these weapons and introduce them into the game. I'd also have to imagine, for each weapon, by default, within the creative environment, they already have an allotted perk pool that has been pre-approved for each weapon classification as to not create broken weapons during the creative process. Why not just say, Here's 10 perks for slot 1, here's 10 perks for slot 2, and here's 10 perks for slot 3, and none of them are fundamentally game-breaking combinations. We know that this is possible because that's pretty much what they were doing by the end of Destiny 1. Iasaluna and Palindrome, for example, although the same classification of hand cannon, did not in fact pull from the same perk pools. So to bring it all back around to something that might actually resemble a point, with as generous as the flow of loot is in Destiny 2, and the grind to catch them all being fairly easy, with as many opportunities as there currently is to get loot, and the addition of even more opportunities, doing nothing more currently than making the game even more casual, leaving me wonder, why didn't they bring back random rolls? Even if we just look at Destiny 2 as a game about collecting things and not grinding out the perfect Better Devil's hand cannon, this is perplexing. Because unless there is a huge dump of loot into the loot pool with the Curse of Osiris, the size of nothing we have ever seen before, the speed at which you collect everything will take no time at all. And even if there is a huge dump of loot within the Curse of Osiris, you still run into the problem of good loot versus bad loot. Loot that is only there to get in your way of getting the actual good loot. Filler loot, essentially. And again, in the case of Destiny 2, trash loot will only ever be trash loot. Without random rolls, weapons that are statistically good but have shit perks will only ever have shit perks. So it doesn't matter how much loot they add to the game, only a fraction of that loot will be worth getting. And am I the only one that noticed we're not getting a proper vendor refresh? I pointed this out at the beginning of the video, but for those of you not paying attention, in the blog post under ornaments, Bungie states, ornaments will be applied to base pieces that you may already have collected, and you can unlock at the vendors if not. In Season 2, the following sets have ornaments unlocked in their respective activities: Vanguard Faction Armor, Crucible Faction Armor, Trials of 9 Armor, Iron Banner Armor, Dead Orbit Armor, Future Warcult Armor, New Monarchy Armor, Eater of Worlds Raid Lair Armor. So we know that the base armor will be the same, and we know that the weapon on display in Shax's inventory is the sword he currently sells. I'm going to make this wild and crazy prediction and say, once again, that the vendors won't be refreshing the way we've seen in past Destiny updates, where we get new weapons and armor for the Crucible and the Vanguard and yada yada yada. And that although we will see new weapons in Season 2, like for factions, a lot of the same old stuff will be there as well, with the additional layer that the old weapons will have new roles. In fact, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's already been confirmed. But hypothetically speaking, if true, this invalidates the entire exercise of removing random rolls. Because if there's two different Better Devils hand cannons in rotation, the Season 1 Better Devils and the Season 2 Better Devils, then removing random rolls was pointless. Because you've created an environment in which weapons are no longer readable on sight and have two distinct and different possibilities. And hey, you know what? Like with most things, I hope I'm wrong. I hope that this is a case of them not wanting to show off the new weapons. But then again, we do know for a fact that the armor is staying the same, only with ornaments. And Bungie does have a terrible, terrible track record with reskinning things. So why bother changing the model? Why bother changing the paint job when you can just change the perks? You know, remove all pretenses. All in all, the unfortunate truth is this: the December update in and of itself will do little to change Destiny 2. After a few weeks, if not a few days, we will be right back where we are now. Although there are major quality of life changes coming to Destiny 2 in the form of how we get loot, the acquisition of loot was never the issue. It was always having loot worth getting and having things to do with that loot once we got it. Rome was not built in a day, and I understand that sweeping changes take time. That said, all the current changes do is throw more loot at players in the hopes that they won't notice nothing of fundamental value has been improved outside of how we get loot, which, I reiterate, wasn't an issue to begin with. The endgame will be entirely dependent on a small raid. The mod system is still trash. Where are the PvP mods? Where are the PvE mods? Where are the raid mods? Where are the exotic mods? Currently, the mod system is dull and uninspired. This update does nothing to change the two primary weapons system, and how limiting it is not only for the player but for the developer, and how unsatisfying it is in general, limiting the use of shotguns, snipers, and fusion rifles because rockets is always the best answer. The limited subclasses with weak abilities and long cooldowns has not been addressed. Perhaps this will be addressed in the sandbox update, but as of now, it has not. The fact that the Crucible is still only 2 aggregated playlists that are only 4v4 has not been addressed. The dumbing down of the game and the removal of anything that created a skill gap has not been addressed. And since so much of the update was about loot and how you obtain it, might I ask, where's the strike-specific loot? How about the Raid, Trials, and Iron Banner, Ships, Sparrows, and Ghosts? Sure, rank play is on the table finally, and seems to be making it to the top of their list of things to do. But if you pay close attention to the update, it reads as such: private matches for the Crucible still targeting early 2018, and expect to have better insight into exact timing in the new year. We are also moving ranked PvP to the top of our priorities list for next year to support the competitive community. Private matches, a much needed feature, has an expected release window. Ranked play is just nebulous sometime 2018. Could be with the Rasputin DLC, could be with the April update, if we get one. Could be with Taken King 2 Electric Boogaloo, given Bungie's history for only releasing content with large updates. Also, not to look a gift horse in the mouth, but until the community was practically on Bungie's doorstep with pitchforks and torches in hand, ranked wasn't high on their priority list. When they needed something to pacify the core community, well, then suddenly it moved up. Imagine that. But the December update, and even the listed objectives of what's coming, do nothing to fix the core issues intrinsic to Destiny 2. It's so mind-boggling to see so many people bedazzled by this update. What did we actually get here? No, really, what did we get? Like, look at the update, look at the game, what did we get? I mean, really, the game was made even easier. Between 3 of Coins returning, Xur's faded engram, Shaxx and Zavala's friendship is magic gift buffs, why are we even grinding for loot anymore? Why isn't everything just unlocked? Why isn't there just a vending machine where we insert 2 tokens and a blue and out comes confetti and all the exotics and legendaries for that release of the game? I mean, that's basically where we're at right now. Look, I'm not unreasonable. I knew going into this reveal that Destiny 2 would not be fixed overnight with the Curse of Osiris or the December update. What I think many had hoped for was a long-term roadmap of what's to come. Things like fixes and changes to systems that the community clearly does not like or want that were introduced with Destiny 2. What we got, however, was an easier, dumbed-down, casual game, whose only appeal would be to the large group of casual adopters who have already left the game for something else. Bungie has made it clear that the core gamer, the hobbyist, as they call us in their most recent podcast, is not the audience they want or care about. Unless, of course, you are a needy fanboy who cares more about shaders and the contents of cosmetic-only engrams and playing dress-up with your virtual Barbie doll. Then they care about you. But for anybody who wants a deep game with vast lore, interesting worlds to explore, great loot to collect and grind for, interesting gameplay mechanics, and fun gunplay, well, you're just too hard to develop content for, so sorry, but not sorry. But like always, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below, and like always, stay frosty.